in a container, because once you expose it to air, which always has moisture in it, that's the catalytic moisture. It's gone. And the bottle full of rock. Now, the odd thing is that one is obviously a bit different, the clear one that I showed you before, because that seems to stay liquid for quite a long time. It's still a good present, I think. Micron measurements on the back. What is it?
105 or
1 millimetre.
oh right, okay.
But just a touch over 1 millimetre. I didn't thin the PV out.
Okay.
Because you're after some 1 millimetre card, weren't you?
We were, and we sold it. We've gone to polypack now.
Yeah, I've seen it.
Yeah, which is a different.
Ralph showed me a bit on Tuesday.
Actually, it's only 0.9 the polypack.
Yeah,
It does cook well.
that cuts well.
Yeah. Well, I laminated some ordinary card together, and that came out quite well.
That's
Yeah.
I
I put it through a roller to make sure it was well enough compressed.
So when I just did that, and I thought, hang on, this is as near a millimetre as you get.
That's right.
Well, it's within a hair, because a hair's about 50 microns. So we've got to wait for a camera to start, so can we start without?
How are you getting on in there, Chris?
Well, not that fast yet, have we? Got a couple of minutes yet.
Yeah, okay. Right.
There's some problems.
I'll just stick around for a while.
Oh, Joe, I'm going to move. Honestly, I'll move. I will. I'll move.
I've got to be careful with this because I use this in the workshop, but I prefer using a gas hob, because it's, I think, more controllable, because this stuff, you turn it down,
Takes a while to cool
and
down.
electric,
Retain
it takes a
the
while
heat.
to cool down.
Yeah.
So this, I'll tell you a funny story about this. It's not really part of that. That pot was my dad's, and I think, so I'm not going to publish that widely. My dad was an apprentice for Henry Royce, and then he went on, during the war, he worked for the fairies, building fairy battles, fairy swordfish. He was based some of the time at Ringway, some of the time at Heaton Chapel. Of course, they used to build aeroplanes in there, but lots of things that they used to do to bend formers, they used to do with those glue pots. That was his glue pot, which survived the test of time. I've started using it, well, in recent years, I've started using it again, and I thought, that is a bit mad, really. But you can still pick them up second hand.
We used to have them at school,
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
woodwork.
That's where it all started with me. So, if anybody fancies boiled egg shortly, I'll be able to. Nicely, that.
Just a second.
Getting your best shot.
I thought he was reading them on reviews.
Show your best side, Ken.
Yeah.
Anytime you like.
Right.
Right, we'll get going then.
We start.
You can do it, Ken. You can do
I'll
it.
just introduce you.
Go on then.
Good evening, gentlemen. Thank you for your attendance. And when I saw what this talk was about, I was like, glue? Strange. And then start thinking, how many different glues are there? How many applications for each glue? And I'm sure our speaker tonight, Ken Newton, one of our own members, is going to put us wise to that. So, no further ado, over to Ken Newton.
Good evening all.
Good evening.
I I'm going to cover glue, and I'm going to cover it from the point of view of model making, although we will diversify here and there into other uses for it. And I was adding up, it's for about 63 years I've been making or using animal glue and French polish. And it started at school in woodwork. And I went to a technical high school, so there were a lot of technical subjects, metalwork, woodwork, and associated things. Engineering, drawing, all of those sorts of things. And for quite a lot of years, in the intervening years, I went on to use other adhesives. I built boats from when I was about 14 or 15. I've started off with canoes, and then I built sailing dinghies. I built bigger boats, so I've used a lot of epoxies over the years and watched glues develop. And so I'm going to cover sort of a little bit of rapid history on glues and what we've even got today. And I'm going to start, weirdly, with French polish, because you can't really call it glue, but you'll see when we go further on that it appears to adapt with lots of things. So I make my own French polish. I've always made it, and this bottle, which is called Ken's Special Polish, is sort of a muddy dark colour, and I use several different sorts. That most of it I make myself. That's a special pale polish, which is quite thin. And I know that members here use heavy white sealer as well for sealing cardboard. I'm going to come on to cardboard later. This is heavy white sealer, and this one has been stood for probably 2 or 3 years, and you can see the white bit is at the bottom, and what's above it is pretty clear, fairly good French polish. That stuff in that jar is 40 odd years old, because I've still got some old bottles of FT Morel, the company, their own French polish. They still make French polish, but not anywhere like they used to do. But this sealer is a grain filler as well, and that was what it was meant for. And I know a lot of people here use sealer as a shellac sealer, which is what French polish is, to seal cardboard. Now, the good thing about French polish is that to make it is so easy, it is beyond belief. You buy your selected flakes, garnet polish, which is usually quite dark, and that's probably mainly garnet. You just put the flakes in a jam jar, put some meths on. If you want, I use denatured ethanol as well, but I've used meths for donkey's years. Only thing to be careful of is that you don't get anything that's got added water. It's got to be 100% spirit. If you get stuff with water in, the polish will go off, and you'll see lots of instances on the internet and YouTube, if you look at it, where people say, oh, you can only use the polish for a short while. You'll see people talk about using vodka and things like that for making French polish. No, don't do it, because it might be 40% spirit, but the other 60% is H2O, which doesn't make good polish. So stick with the spirit, make sure you know where you can get it from. Brushes, I use squirrel brushes, squirrel hair. You can get them from art shops now. I used to buy them from Morel's, the French polish maker, but they don't do them anymore. But all the art shops do squirrel brushes. Important that you use a squirrel brush, preferably. It'll go rock hard, and this is just, I call this is meths. It's a wash. And if you've got a rock hard brush, you don't need to wash them out afterwards. I just swish them in there and then leave them to dry. If it ends up rock hard, which it will, all you do is put it in the mess. I put that in, it was rock hard when I came tonight, and in 5-10 minutes it's soft and ready to use. When that gets really dark, and that's not really there yet, obviously the thicker, the more polish that gets into the wash, the harder your brush goes, but it still doesn't matter, it'll still sort out. Don't throw it away. I tip it in, it becomes Ken's special polish. And if it gets a bit thin, I just stick a few flakes in it. And eventually I'll get bits of all sorts of rubbish that go in this one, but I'm not really bothered. I keep another brush for special pale polish, but this one generally gets used the most. If you want to use up your polish, perfect way to do it. Cardboard boxes that you use for storage, do the inside of them, because then they won't take up any moisture if they're in your workshop or your shed, and it waterproofs them. Which brings me on to what can you use that for as well. We're not French polishing with a rubber or doing anything fancy, but you can do it with anything on wood. You can give any wood a coating with polish and it will dry in seconds. Its shelf life is, I think, pretty indefinite. You've got to do something pretty bad to ruin it. If you keep it in a sealed jar, remember to wipe the top, because if you don't, you'll end up with the lid stuck on. But if you do, doesn't matter, just get another jar, put a hole in that, tip it in another one, throw the jar away. You can see that jar's been around a while, but it's just the way it is. Another good use for French polish, and this is a really good one, good tip. I used to buy in the 60s and 70s ex-army tools, you know, with the good old chevron marking on, and you used to find them in ex-army surplus places, and they looked dreadful. And the reason they looked dreadful was they got a coat of French polish on them, because that's what they used to put on to protect the metal. Somebody's nodding here. Yeah. And all you need to do is clean it off with a bit of mess. But that means if you've got one or two things and you think, oh, I don't want that to go rusty, or I want to protect it, or I'm not going to use it very often, put some French polish on it. It dries in seconds. You won't get any rust on it. When you want to use it, you can carry on using it with the French polish on. If not, you want to clean it up, bits of mess. Denatured ethanol, which is clear, and I think somebody the other night, was it you who mentioned that you could get clear mess? I can't remember. Yeah. Anyway, somebody mentioned on Tuesday night you could get clear. You can. Obviously the purple colour was put into it to stop people drinking it. And but I wouldn't advise you to try drinking that. Be careful as well, because I have seen, only because I'm a bit of a crackpot, and if I've got nothing better to do I might look on YouTube to see what somebody's talking about with French polish or something like that. Quite a few people have decided that the hand wash that you've been using during lockdown makes good. No, it doesn't, because it's only 70%. What do you think the other the other 30% is going to be? Whatever it might be, but it's not good for making French polish or whatever you want to call it. So that's the shellac cupboard, and there, for example, I've just put a bit on some laminated card, and it instantly turns the card into something that's really good and really solid. It hardens it up a bit, makes it a bit less bendy. Also, can anybody think of any other uses that French polish is used for? Has anybody heard of knotting?
Oh yeah.
Knotting, which is the stuff that you put on knots in timber to stop them bleeding through paint, is French polish. Shellac, nothing else. And that gives rise to the next interesting point. you can paint on it, obviously, because any oil-based paint will go on top of it, but not necessarily a water-based paint. So that's covered French polish, and so when you see it, great, always have a go at using it. There's a bit of something there that I did that yesterday. That's a piece of marine ply. And it's interesting, whilst we're on adhesives, I'll diversify slightly. Does anybody know why marine ply is called marine ply? Because it's meant for use in a marine environment, salt water. And that means two things which are very important: that the laminates in the ply are stuck together with a waterproof, not water resistant, but waterproof adhesive, and that the wood in each ply is also suitable for saltwater environment. And the other thing which not many people know about, and that's a good example, it will have no voids. If it's got any voids in it whatsoever, it's not suitable to be called marine grade. Now the next ply down the list, and this is still adhesives, will have a similar adhesive to this, if not the same adhesive, but the actual wood that they use is not suitable for a marine environment. But it's called WBP, and the WBP stands for water and boil proof. So it's still pretty good plywood, and it will stay fairly stable. Then you get onto birch face ply, which will go wibbly wobbly all over the place if it's wet and delaminate. In WBP you shouldn't find any voids, but you do occasionally find them. When they manufacture it, they usually put a filler in the void, so if you cut through it in the wrong place, you might end up with a bit of filler falling out. That's just an aside, but it tells you which sort of glue they use, and I'll cover the actual glue shortly as well. The next thing I'm going to talk about is, I think I'll do it in this order, laminating card. And I brought here, anybody that buys card for model making, great, if you can get the right card that you want. But I'm going to show you now how to get free card forevermore. And they live in these packets to keep them passably dry. And you may recognise some of the things that come out of here. I'll pull a bunch out.
See the boxes?
Yeah, all right.
Nestle. It's got Special K. That's mine, the Special K. There'll be a huge bunch in here. Shredded wheat. Everything. But you will notice that you get different sorts of card on the back. These are quite nice actually. This is really nice, shiny stuff. This is shredded wheat.
Is that a plastic film on it though?
So,
Is it a plastic film, you know, on the print side?
no,
That's still
this
card.
is printed. I'll tell you about the problems with using this. But it's great source.
Yeah.
You can measure it with a micrometer, and then depending what you want to do, you can laminate it up to any size you want. The bit I gave to Les before, I think, is a bit of Kellogg's. Kellogg's tend to use these more basic brown card on the back. The worst one is one here, but sticking is Weetabix. And I brought you one of these. You can feel. That's the one I throw away, the front cover, because it's embossed, and so you end up with Weetabix,
Right.
whether you like it or not. So, but I've just put one of those in just to show. I think they're the worst, but Weetabix are completely independent. It's quite a good card though. and it will, you know, laminate's okay. And I laminate them using generally PVA glues, which is what everybody that I know here, Les uses PVA, don't you, and Ralph, etc. And we'll talk about PVA in a minute, but that's your free source. The piece that I just gave to Les, which is, I think it was a piece of Kellogg's paper or card, and on this side is hot pressed watercolour paper that I just have a few bits and pieces of, and I laminated them together and I get 1 mil. Anybody who's laminated card like that will know that the big problem is when you use PVA, it's a water-based adhesive, and also the cards might dry at different rates, but eventually they will go flat. And what I've got underneath here, and that's why unfortunately I don't have any little bits of this weighs a ton. It's a tile.
Oh, yeah.
If you go into any tile shop and say, have you got anything that you don't use or end of the line, they'll put that pancake flat and they've got nice finish on them and they're perfect. I've not brought two, but you can use two of those. You can put a piece of card on the bottom and do them back to back, and I then use cling film, or sometimes I'm not bothered, I just put the adhesive on, but I don't want it to ooze out, so I keep it fairly thin around the edges, or I don't go to the edge and then trim the card afterwards. It's entirely up to you. If you put cling film on, that just seals the moisture in, it means it takes even longer to dry, but I'll keep it flat until it goes off, which is about 10-15 minutes, so I might leave them for a few hours. I don't know how long Les leaves it, but then if you bring it out into the dry, you will find that it might curve, so then you stick it back between, but you can get it flat even by doing that. The nice thing about using a bit of hot pressed watercolour paper, or any watercolour paper, is that you can paint on it afterwards. So if you were of a mind to do a building and want to decorate the side and paint it, this will paint beautifully with watercolour paint. And then you could do whatever you want. You could put a spray clear varnish on or anything you want. But it does give you the chance to paint on it rather than have to put a layer of paint on and then do something else. But you can imagine a side of a cottage, you've got a few daffodils growing up there. Don't mess about, just paint them on, because nobody's going to, even on that, they're not going to check at that rate. The way I put the glue on is important. I've got a piece of magic here. There it is. It's an AA membership card. I don't know how anybody else puts PVA onto things. I will use a brush, maybe to brush it on very quickly, but then I use the card to thin it out to get an even layer. If you put too much on, you make it an even worse job of it. And in fact, sticking that's, you've got the other end of that there, and that was, when I measured it dry, it was under 1 millimetre. But with the adhesive in, it's gone up to 1050. I'm assuming everybody knows what a micron is, do they? It's 1,000th of a millimetre. So it's a very small measurement. But that's how a lot of card is sold, a lot of watercolour paper, things like that. They would say how many microns it is, rather than giving you the thickness. I think Dale Rowney mountboard will come in, correct me if I'm wrong, 1.3, 1.5. They do two. One's better quality. Other people's mountboards are different sizes. So again, you can work it out. But the adhesive on that, is going to be at least 50 microns, maybe a bit thicker. And that was an incredibly thin layer. sometimes I put too little on and the damn thing doesn't stick properly. But I always stick the shiny faces together so that I end up with two like that. And I tend to use PVA because of the shiny surface. So that's the spreader I use. I'll show you the adhesive afterwards. What I've got. This little device that I showed you before, I make loads of these. I've recently started doing something a bit unusual, but I'll tell you about that as well. This I use to, if I've got a piece of card, I'll put the card down, it's 120 grit, just decorated sandpaper, which is a bit tougher than usual, and I just give the surface see how that just knocks the surface off, because some of them the PVA doesn't quite grip, and just roughing it up that little bit means you get a much better joint. And then you need one of those. I'll get into trouble here. You just brush it off that, otherwise it just gets completely clogged up. But those are really useful to, just make them out of scraps. What I've recently started doing, I used to stick these on with, well, anybody wants to guess what I used to stick them on with? I used to use contact adhesive, Eva stick and things like that. And I thought, that's a real mess because I can't get them off easily. You end up wrecking them getting them off. And I'm now sticking them on with hot glue. There is a potential slight problem. If your sandpaper is quite thick, I put a layer on the back of the sandpaper and stick it on. Sometimes, particularly when you're doing it for the first time, it doesn't stick properly. So then I put another little layer on and maybe stick it on the second time. But as you'll see when I do the demo with the animal glue, it can sometimes get a bit lumpy and a bit thick. But I've got a wood burning stove in the workshop, and I discovered that if I just do that and put it on the top of the stove, I mean literally 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, pick it up, it will have all melted and be oozing out the side, and it's done. And when you want to get it off, put it on the stove. I've got a piece of aluminium that I leave on top of the stove so it doesn't go on. Just leave that on there, 10 seconds, just tear it off, peels off, put a new piece on. So suddenly I've got a piece of magic. No problem. And if you can want to tear that off, you can do. So that's what those do. So that's that little one. I'll go on now to just briefly talking about animal glues. This stuff, this is now easily ready for use. I had a few unusual looks tonight when I brought that in, and we'll do a demo later with this, and anybody that wants to have a go can have a go. Stick that down there for now. I have got some animal glue that was my grandfather's on my mother's side, and I will guarantee that it's 70 years plus old. Used to come in slabs. Does anybody remember it in big slabs? It was a big slab, and you had to smash it up with a hammer to get all the little sharps. And then all you did was you put it in your glue pot and covered it with water, left it overnight. Next morning it's gone to sort of like gel, like jelly. And then you can just add a bit more water if you want, heat it up, and ready for use. Now I tend to use these. These are basically beads of animal glue. Relatively cheap to buy, easy to get hold of on the internet, and all you do is you pour those in a jar like that, cover them with water, maybe plus a bit. I tend to make it fairly strong and then thin it down as I need to, but you'll find that as you keep using it and warming it up, it will some of the water will evaporate, so you need to add a bit more. This stuff is great. Now, the glue pot's great, but most people aren't going to have one. So, I've come up with a simple idea. A lot of people said baby's bottle warmers, but baby's bottle warmers, again, are a bit iffy and not really great temperature control. That's a pan, yeah? In the bottom of it, I did try doing it with marbles, but I noticed that the marbles don't like getting too hot because you'll be careful how I say this. Marbles from another country, and they've got little air globules inside them, and when the air expands, it pops the marbles. So I noticed that my wife had some ceramic beads for blind baking. So I pinched some of those, and that's what's in there. And they don't split because they're meant to go in an oven at much higher temperatures. And I put a few on the bottom just to keep the jar off the bottom of the pan, so it's not got direct heat. It's worse on a hot plate than it is on a gas one. But if you've got a thick bottom pan, maybe you get away with it. But putting a few of those on. Now I can pick that up with my fingers. It's not burning me because the temperature that you want the glue at is 70 centigrade. You don't want to boil it, so doing it this way, even if the water does boil, the likelihood is that you're going to have to go some to get it up. I've got this set on fairly low. It's probably a little bit thick at the moment. You can, if you test it, if you can see how that's a little bit thick. So I'll just try and put a bit more heat on that. Blowing my own trumpet again. When I was at school, I made a coal scuttle out of English oak, and the joints on it are rub joints made with animal glue, and that was a good 60 years plus ago, and they're still okay. The magic about this glue, which would have been used in most furniture historically, is that it will last an awful long time. On the internet you will see quite a few people who say, oh, throw it away after 6 months. Well, hang on a minute. If it's no good after 6 months, how come everything you make with it doesn't fall to bits? It does last a long, long time. And here's the other magic, like the French polish. You can regenerate this. So if you've got a joint with animal glue that's come unstuck and broken, because it will get fairly brittle, the simple way to sort it out is heat. Either a hot air gun, boiling water, steam, it'll all come off. No matter how many years. If you've got an epoxy, you're in dead trouble because it won't come off, and then it starts again or start doing something fairly major. So this is the magic bit about this is that it will just come and go. You can heat it up, let it dry out. I've got some in there that must be that's the old original stuff that's in there. So the glue itself will have been heated up. Well, I've used the pot many times, but it will have been heated up several times, and the actual glue is donkey's years old. The big problem is I've just got it boiling now, so I'll just go down because it'll take a while to get through. These cost peanuts. Well, I say peanuts, I don't know, fiver. It's a probe thermometer. So I can stick it in the glue. Uh, 73 degrees. There's only one snag with this. What you end up with a thermometer that's got glue on it. But you can get it off with just hot water. So that would be ready for use now. I've got a variety of brushes. All of these have been used. I left this one just to show you what happens. Rock hard. But don't worry, just put it in some hot water. In a few minutes, soft again. This one has had quite a lot of use. This bit here, you can come out and feel afterwards, it's like rock. That is an actual glue brush. They're all bristle brushes. This one is my first experiment with a synthetic fibre one, but they're not very good. This is the best, the bristle one. These are dirt cheap bristle brushes, and when you first use them, a few bristles will come out. But I mean, a pack of 3 of those is a couple of quid, so it's not worth bothering. But they do go, play a drum with it. But you can either leave it in the glue, or if you leave it in too deep, it'll do it in this or hot water. The synthetic ones, I'll use this one and you'll see what happens, because this one, it has happened to many times and I can't believe it comes back straight, but it'll end up like a horrible mess at the end, because the synthetic fibres, obviously when they get hot, deform. But once you've washed it in boiling water and left it to go back to normal, so you could use one if you're on a mind to. So I'll just stick something together with it, and I've got a few samples here that you can have a look at. I don't know if anybody would know what a rubbed joint is. What you will find with animal glue is that it congeals very quickly, and another major advantage of it, and that's why I think it's brilliant stuff. I'm going to put some on here. I've got 2 pieces, and if you rub them just for a bit, you get a much thinner joint. Now you could clamp it. There you go. Beat that with anything else for a glue. Pull it apart. You probably can, because it'll take 24 hours to harden.
Yeah.
But you felt that it was...
Good resistance.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
If I heat this up,
It'll go, yeah.
it'll go.
Yeah.
But you saw how quick that grabbed.
Yeah.
And to show it, there's one I did yesterday. That's had 24 hours.
That's solid as this one.
It's right.
Right, okay. In fact, I'd like to see the join, isn't it?
Yeah.
Now the nice thing about the animal glue as well, it cleans up easy, hot water
Let's see the
cloth.
join on that.
If you want to sand it, you can sand it. If you want to paint it, you can paint it. You want to varnish it, you can varnish it. It's what all the old-fashioned woodworkers used to use for veneering.
I can remember my dad using it in his hobby of woodworking.
But isn't it sad that we've forgotten
Yes.
What wood's that?
how good these things are? I mean, that's not complicated, is it? And it's cheap. Everything's free apart from the glue and the brush. The sad thing is, it's not brilliant for laminating polish card, but if you've got card that's already been stuck together, you know, the polished sides, it's brilliant for rubber card. And you can do the same. So in other words, if you're building something with card, where you've already got a fairly porous stuff, or you've got bits of balsa wood sticks to it, brilliant balsa wood, and a hot air gun if you got stuck and you can delaminate anything with it, or hot water. I could take these off. The reason when I first started doing these, I used to use marine ply and then just put them in hot water to get the... And then I thought, actually, now I've got the hot surface, you know, I could use a hot plate on that with a bit of, I put a bit of aluminium sheet on, put it on the top and it's off. So I don't need the bother of ending up with the surface wet and messing about. As you can see, I'm all for making life as simple and easy as you can. And it works. So, I'll stick MDF. We all use MDF, don't we? Of all sorts. You know, you can use it in modelling, right, left and centre. But if I've got 2 pieces of MDF, I'll do another. I often use a stick in preference to a brush, but I'll stick a brush in there afterwards. You see, you can, if you put a piece on with a stick and then you just rub it,
Where do you get the garlic flakes from? The garlic flakes.
So, Ralph asked me on Tuesday if I'd do a list, and I can do a list with people, but if anybody's scribbling down notes, there's a company called Bolgers, Bolgers.
Yeah.
And they, there's a few names that people will know, like Liberon, you know, the French polish people, but they do all of the shellacs, they do all of the pearl glues, and they're not very dear to buy a kilo. I mean, if 2 or 3 of you got together, I mean, it's a couple of quid for a good blob of glue. Certainly as cheap as PVA or anything else when you work out the cost. So Bolgers do shellac flakes, pearl glue. There's a company which I've mentioned which is called Morels, but I've now they've moved into a very specific marketplace now. They do a lot of spray lacquers for furniture and stuff, and they've dropped a lot of the French polish stuff. So you're better off going somewhere. Oh, another good place, Axminster Power Tools. Everybody's heard of them, haven't they? They'll do shellac flakes, and they probably do pearl glue. I know they do shellac. The other thing is, I know that Ralph, and you use shellac, do you buy it ready-made or do you make your own?
Got the ready-made that Ralph got it.
Yeah.
We got the liver on.
You pay a bit more getting the ready-made,
Yeah.
and it's not hard. I mean, as long as you can pour a liquid in a bottle and put some flakes in, you're done. There is, that was what I was going to mention. If you're into French polishing, what they used to do is, once you've made the French polish, whichever sort you use with the shellac, if you let it stand for a long, long time, you'll get very clear stuff at the top and murky stuff at the bottom. And the stuff at the top is what they used to call tops polish. And that's what the French polishers wanted for doing the finest work. But I don't think for model making or for our particular needs it's going to get into that zone. but that's what they call tops. And again, I mentioned you get special pails, you can get middle, you can get all sorts of different grades of flakes to make it. And have a go. It's so easy. It's not true. Just ordinary meths will do as well. You don't need to get fancy ethanol or anything else. I've used meths for donkey years. I forgot when I was talking about laminating, I used one of these as well. And that's, once I put the PDA glue on, I give this a good roll in. But you'd see that, I'll laminate one later on. Right. And then else I've probably forgot to mention something amongst that. I'll just show you what happens with this as well. I'll leave that in there. And we'll have a look what the brush does afterwards. That's the bit I've just stuck. You can pass that round as well if you want. And that's had a few more minutes.
Yeah.
And the cleaning up's easy as well. You can get it off with a hot cloth, dip round the edges, scrape it off with your fingernail.
What's this basic material?
That's
MDF.
MDF.
Is it?
It's solid.
Yeah, no.
I'm going to show you. Have I maligned the internet a little bit? But I'll show you a trick I learned off the internet now. Still on adhesives. Who uses super glue? This is going to be tricky to. I need a space to show you. You've probably seen endless different, everybody and their dog does super glue. I tend to use now Everbuild. It's not because I'm not an Everbuild salesman, but it's dirt cheap. You can get it from Tool Station, Screwfix, anywhere. Now, first magic thing about super glue is, does anybody ever go off in a bottle and get really thick? And do you want to know how to stop that ever happening? This requires a benign woman, because you keep it in the fridge. Sorry if I probably maligned but my wife said, what are you doing with glue in the fridge? Yeah, so, but it works. You put it in the fridge, it stays liquid. You can also get viscous ones that are more sticky, which they say are better for doing fillets and joints and everything else.
And once it's gone off, can you get it back into liquid form?
No.
No.
No, it doesn't work like that, I'm afraid. It's a chemical reaction. It's cyanoacrylic. Does anybody know what? I know I've got somebody who's a bit scientific here. Super glue magic, this is called. Do you know what it is? This is the trick. I've got to get it so I can get some super glue out, but that in itself might be a trick.
You're in the fridge too long.
Actually, I might have a hole in the end of that. Well, this is a good demo.
I had that problem.
We all have that problem, don't we? Yeah, it's coming out. There you go. Now, that's liquid super glue, yeah? And if I put a bit of the super glue magic on it,
That's baking powder, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, yeah. Oh, that sounds giving away your secret, scared.
Well, it's not
I've heard
actually
it, I've
baking
said
powder, but it's bicarbonate of soda, but it's the
Yeah,
same stuff.
yeah.
And it's now rock hard.
Yeah.
The only thing with that is, it does leave it a bit lumpy and discoloured if you wanted it on a...
Yeah.
But it does mean that instead of holding something for 10 minutes,
Yeah.
and this is when we're talking about whether sticking a bit of metal, a bit of brass onto a bit of something else, which you could do with super glue.
Yeah.
The trouble is, most of the time, by the time you've moved a bit, or you've not clamped it perfectly, or it's not gone off perfectly, you're in trouble. You can actually buy a spray that does that.
Yeah, I was going to say there's like an actuator, like a glue, and I think it's
Yeah.
used for like woodwork, isn't it? The joint.
Yeah.
Well, I've used it for like I say,
They call it mitre glue, and
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
charge a fortune,
They do.
and it's probably just liquid.
That, yes.
But you can have a, I can, that was really, I can go snap it now. I was doing this before, but you see it's fairly, it goes very quickly. Just a bit of madness that, but it works. The big clue there is keeping it in the fridge.
Yes, yes, I've heard that, yes.
You can,
How do you stop it clogging up the tube? Before it's not?
you have to poke a hole in it.
Yeah.
There isn't an easy way of doing it.
Does it keeping it in the fridge prevent
Actually, this is an old bottle that I pulled. I did actually buy a new bottle because I thought, and I forgot to put the new bottle in. I put the old one in. I thought I'll put a new bottle in because then if you're doing a demo, you think you can actually buy, and I have some super glue remover, which when they first invented super glue, they didn't invent the super glue remover quick enough. Hence the reason why lots of people revelry, going out for a bit of revelry on stag nights ended up stuck to lampposts and things. And we used to try and surgically separate people that got super glued together. Then they realised that after 24 hours, your skin naturally rejects it because of the oils in your skin. So if you do stick your fingers together, don't think, oh, I've got to put them in boiling water or get a scalpel or something. Just wait and it'll feel right. Have a glass of whiskey, go to sleep, and by the time you wake up, your fingers will be back to normal.
That's interesting, but wasn't that the reason super glue was actually invented as a medical thing
Well,
for sticking skin together
yeah.
to heal?
the one that they use is slightly different. I mean, it's actually a cyanoacrylic. The cyano bit always worried me. In fact, the acrylic bit should worry you because anybody who did anybody watch the news today? Did you see the one about nail polish?
Yeah.
And women with the nails dropping off because, because they've got acrylic nails and the stuff when it's in its liquid state is quite dangerous. I mean, I suppose I should have started with the health and safety thing. I mean, you could burn your fingers. Well, you can burn your fingers, but I can touch that, so it's not that bad. But almost every product now has got endless stuff written on it. And you can also very easily, and I often do look them up, you can get data sheets. Data sheet looking them up, on the manufacturer's data sheets is often very good because they will tell you quite useful information. Not that you want to know a lot of it, but it's often quite useful. Whilst I'm on that subject, I'll just diversify slightly. Everybody's used PVA, haven't they?
Yeah.
Polyvinyl acetate. But I'm just going to do a little weird check. If I said that was D3, would anybody know what it meant?
No.
Well, there are 4 grades of white PVA glue. D1, D2, D3 and D4. This one's a D3. And it will tell you, usually, on the label. But what they don't tell you on the label is what it means. So you have to look up the data sheet. And the data sheet tells you that it'll give you the British Standard spec on the PVA glue. But D3 is quite good. It's water resistant, not D4, which sometimes they define as waterproof, isn't really waterproof, it's heavily water resistant. But I've not got any D4, I don't know anybody that does D4. But Everbuild again, well that's D3, so that's about as good as you get. For our modelling purposes, I would always tend to want to use D3 because at least it's got some water resistance. If it's in a cold environment or miserable environment, it's going to be a bit better. So that's where they are. I've scribbled D3 on that, only because I can't read it without the specs. But I forgot to tell you that when I do a demo with this afterwards. But
Is that a thicker? Is D1 thin, D2 a bit thicker,
well,
D3?
they do tend to be.
Yeah.
In fact,
I've noticed PVA
you
is
can find some really cheap PVAs on the market. I'm not sure whether you can water it down as well.
Yeah, right.
And I often water it down for all sorts of purposes. But I suppose you get different settings. This says fast cure, so it says 10 minutes. Well, it does sort of go off in 10 minutes. The only trouble is it doesn't fully cure. Like most things, you could leave it. Even this stuff, which is virtually instant, it's almost like a contact adhesive. In fact, it's faster than contact adhesive because if you use an Evo stick contact adhesive, you've got to put it on, then you've got to let the solvent evaporate, and then you stick it together. So that's even faster. Just before we get, I'll do the PVA after we've had a drink.
Okay.
Whilst we're on card and card buildings, I for years have used Yoo-hoo because I like it, and that's quick. Yoo-hoo glue. I've not brought any to demonstrate, but maybe everybody's used Yoo-hoo at some time. They do a power bond Yoo-hoo, which goes a bit quicker, which I tend to use if I can get it because it just seems to be a bit faster and a bit better. But works a treat. I'm not going to mention things like Evo Stick, which are Fix-A-Fix. They're all still around. They're solvent based. Petrol is, off the petrol cycle solvents.
When you're ready, you can.
Yeah. You can use petrol to clean them off and things like that. They tend to go off as well in a tin. You leave them in a tin. Eventually they'll go thick and hard. Nothing much you can do about it.
I'm thinking back to cow gun when I was an undergraduate.
Well, yeah.
Or mounting drawing.
Those sorts of glues tend to be water based and not very strong, but they are very safe.
Yeah.
Cow gun was one of the ones that, so it's a bit like almost flour and water paste that you allow kids to use, and it doesn't really matter if they eat it, but eating some of these things wouldn't be very good. So I believe we're about to have a little break.
Yeah.
If anybody's got any mad questions or want to come and have a look and play with anything, and then afterwards I'll do some PVA and a few other things that I've got.
Great stuff, yeah. Great. Lovely, Ken. Thank you.
Okay.
had a pool table, still got a pool table, but it's not space to put out. Like most was more you accumulate. We have managed to clear a bit of it recently. It's getting better. Control one. You live in the Spanky Meadow. Yeah, Spanky Meadow, fly over there. You live in that area, don't you? They were the big block of flats. Yeah, no bricks. Yeah, so we're in Spanky Meadow. Yeah, I mean, each year's a bit which kept the lawns being cut very
They took me back to my days at the silver fence. It was in the late 60s. Everything was in these various states of preservation. The first one, the big issue with the HF radio, and they were in very long-term storage. And somebody pointed out, well, we're supposed to have 72 hours. That was the worst thing. It was take about that radio.
I think before my time.
No, it's the old it's great,
when I joined, I never saw it.
when Ralph did his presentation on the mill, he said one of the latest photo etching, 3D printing, it's still the shell. It's just that wonderful build-up. As you say, you don't need to forget the old stuff, you just get some new stuff.
I guess lots of stream flowing out of the
Mersey curves round.
the main part of it curves around. There's a tributary which comes along and joins it. It goes round the edge of the where the field for landing.
It's weird what we forget to see now.
I'm sure that is the whole. There is another part of the main part of the main Mersey. It sort of goes round the whole
When someone of an age where he could use your maternity schemes, and
now and again it ends up in the river.
one of his mates was keyed up with an old time-served sign painter who told him all these wrinkles and penalty things that and he's had a career out on the west coast of California about the last 20 odd years doing this stuff around. He did a whole string of shops. One visited him jump of life one. So it's nice that when those things are just pulled back
down
from
to the river.
just about
In the summer and all the vegetation, be careful where you walk. One or two.
Yeah, I don't mind living in the past.
Some guy
Right.
he was okay. Well, bits of dropping and then water's the on. Where I'm talking about, it's a bit like a cliff edge, and then you got a bit of foot area, and then you got the river. So you didn't actually go the river as well, but you've got to be careful because you can't really see it. So you've got to can be a bit dodgy.
Got some glass yogurt type pots at the back, you know, these sort of glass containers.
I could just do with one. No, I don't. Otherwise I'll mess up cleaning up after.
Feeling right for the second half of the show, Ken?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Right, off you go then.
Just finishing off a little bit from the first half. So I'll put this away, but I'll just give you. As I said before, with the polish, just whizzing back. Squirrel brush. This is my my own special pale polish, special thick brown polish. I mean, literally, I'll go over the whole shooting match because that's the first bit. If you put a second coat on over the coat, and I'll just leave that to dry for a couple of seconds, and then you can see what it goes like. So you bring in a bit of the other good thing about it is you can always seal a piece of wood really quickly with just plain polish. You don't have to have the grain filler. I'll let those dry for a couple of seconds. And that is literally, it's much easier if you see somebody do something than even talk about it.
Yeah.
That's all I do. And the reason that that ends up like that is because I usually leave the brush on like that. I'm going to just quickly, because we didn't really, I did it sort of in the interval, when I put the glue in here, again, if you see, when it's dribbles like that, that's okay, but you could thin that off quite a lot. Now this brush, which is
Right hair dryer. Will that do it?
it's usually not, well,
Or is
it
not
depends.
hot
If it's on the hot setting, you get fairly close.
Yeah.
Hot air guns tend to be a bit hotter, but that's gone. You can laminate up quite thick as well from card. I mean that's a good thickness. So any card, doesn't matter what it is, don't throw it away anymore. Get a zip top poly bag to keep it reasonably dry, and just gather them. You can make anything you want. Les has actually, not Les, Ralph has actually suggested, because I asked him, because I haven't got a laser cutter, how well you could cut through laminated card, which is something that he might comment on at a later date, because he said he'll have a go at trying some laminated stuff. I can't see why it wouldn't work.
I know he wants to do some fencing. So.
It might be a bit weird with the animal glue, because that would probably melt with the heat, but it only locally heat, so I don't know. I'll just do the bit of PVA stuff. I'll do a couple. We'll go with Nestle. Yes, I'm supposed to say other brands are available. Mess that up a bit, but don't matter. This cutting mat, by the way, another good little tip if you're ever passing. Do you think the cleaner will go mad if I just split that over the side?
No.
If you go into some of these tile places that sell tiles and ask them if they've got any old or whatever or odd ones left over, you can often pick them up for peanuts. I mean, like 20p each. And they make quite useful. They're not very good for cutting mats. I usually use a proper one because you get little grooves in them. But they do make quite good flat surfaces if you're sticking stuff like this down. I'll do this one with PVA. Does anybody find that you get the tops all stuck? Ah, I thought it was just me. Look at that one. Clear the whistle. You know that they pull off, don't you? You could pull the end off and it'll click. And I just chuck them in hot water and leave them for a bit and then poke them out. Normally when I pick one up, I usually find that it's stuck. But because I was coming here, I thought I'll try and make sure I get it right. Now, this is the only thing that's I don't know if everybody does that or whether they use a brush, but you get such a... I'm going to mess up my map here, but it doesn't matter. I'll stick away from the edge. I'm going to stick it as possible. Now, I don't get these from decorator shops, I get them from the art shop. They do, usually they do have a red plastic one. I don't know where this one came from, but this is just my favourite because I can press really hard. And as anybody that's done this will know, what will happen basically is this will stay quite floppy, it's going to be damp, and at the moment I could just, because that's a flat surface, I'm going to ignore it, I can just stick it under there and that will, I usually put it under the tile and that's all I do. I mentioned the D bit on this, and I don't normally wash it down and use it thick and you end up with that layer. This is quite good because the label's disappeared off it. I'm pretty sure it's Type Bond 3. Has anybody used Type Bond? No? Right. The difference between PVA, this is probably the original wood glue, it's American, but very easily available here. It's an aliphatic resin as opposed to a PVA. It dries really quick and it's very strong, and the Type Bond 3, which doesn't come under the UK rules as far as describing it, I think that's probably a D3. It may be a D4, but it's a good adhesive, very similar to PVA. I've got a stick. Get this out with a stick. I'm squeezing this out. See, it's got a sort of yellowy colour to it. And that will stick card together very well. It does exactly the same as that. I think it's probably a little bit superior to PVA. Very good on wood, dries very quick, and it equally will sand and clear up. Doesn't seem to have quite the shine on it when it's dry. You get a lot of this particular PVA, the D3, has got quite a shine on it. And if you tried to watercolour or anything like that on it in a model, you need to put some primer on of some sort to get paint to stick on it. But very good. And this, you can. The only place that I can guarantee that I safely get it from is Axminster Power Tools. They seem to be really into it big time. I'll stick a bit of colour on that. Should have a bit somewhere. There's a bit. And I'll stick that on onto there just and I've not even roughed up the surface on that, but we'll just see what it does afterwards. Now, interesting glues now. Not that they haven't been interesting up to now. When I first started building canoes and dinghies, there were two wood glues that I used to use, and they are sort of semi-relevant to modelling, but a little bit off-piste. First one was Cascamite. Still buy Cascamite.
It's a gap filling glue, isn't it?
It's a good gap filling glue. You just add water to the powder and away you go. Does anybody, or would anybody like to try and guess what's special about this? This one is 40 years old. Guarantee. Because I started using epoxies and I'd left 40 odd years old. And I thought, I'll just try it. And it works. Because you'll have stuck with it. But at least you get to see some. It's dead easy to buy on the internet now. For years, if you'd gone in anywhere like a DIY shop or anything and asked for Cascamite, they would have looked at you as if you were daft. But now, it's easily available on the internet. What I need is a touch of water. That's hard work, isn't it?
Can I get you some?
A tiny bit. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it is a drop. And the other glue that I used to use was Aerolite 306. Now you can still get Aerolite glue. The people that manufacture it now are a completely different company. They bought out the original company. But the thing about that is, I don't know if they drop the 306, but they do several different grades, and they call the catalyst, because it's a 2-pack adhesive, whereas this is a 1-pack adhesive. Watch it. Just work out how to put a little drip on that thing. I'll have to use a stick. You need very little water in it, really. Thought I remembered to bring something to squirt with it. That's it. I mean, that is literally. I could have done that easier if I had a little water thing, but just mix it up into a small paste. You can have a look at that afterwards if you want. Please remember to bring the problem in case it was messy. That's all you do to mix that up. Cascamite is, I'm just looking for the it's basically a single pack. I think it's a urea formaldehyde. Aerolite 306 is definitely a urea for formaldehyde, but they use a catalyst which is formic acid. And you all know where formic acid is very commonly found? Ants. But I'd advise against putting ants in it because it tends to look a bit strange. It just goes off very quick. Aerolite 306, by its name, you can sort of guess what they used to stick together with it. Aeroplanes and also boats. So that really is a waterproof glue. And strangely, I think it's still used today in things like marine plies. So it's that sort of glue. So if it's good enough for that, it's good enough to stick anything. It takes a while to go off, and you've generally got to clamp it. This might go off while we're talking in its initial state, but most adhesives, irrespective of what it might say on the tin or 10 minutes on here, I'd still want to give it 24 hours or longer if possible. And I think that's what I've discovered well, because I'm teaching my grandfather how to, except he's actually only the same age as me, more or less. But, you know, until the moisture's gone, it's likely to curve in any direction it feels like, usually whichever laminates the thinnest or whatever. So don't panic about either way. I've not got any Aerolite 306 at the moment because I don't tend to use it, but I would use it. But I still use Cascamite, and I've got some stuff that's a lot fresher. I think it's about £8 a pack for a huge tub. So it's no dearer than anything else, but really good wood glue. And I would suspect you could actually stick cards together with it if you wanted as well. It would work just as well as a PVA, but PVA is just ready to squirt, isn't it? So choice is yours. PU adhesives, which is the Gorilla Glue, I'm just moving on to them now. That's a joint, butt joint with PU adhesive, and you can, that's just stuck together. I don't think I even clamped it, I think it's just pushed together. Now, when I said what I use for outside woodwork and boats and things like that now, I use epoxy. So I'm moving on fairly quickly to different glues other than model making glues. The epoxy I tend to use the most of is the boat building one I've always used, which is made by a company called West's. And it is very easy to get hold of. Most ship chandlers, canal boat builders, anybody that builds wood boats will always have West's in. There is a big chandlery wholesaler in Middlewich and called Ship Shape Marine. I think they're called Ship Shape. Oh no, that might be the one in.
That's Stockport, isn't it?
That's Stockport. What's it called?
There's one near Daresbury as well, which is
yeah, but they'll all stock Wests, and it's 2-pack. The thing you have to be really careful of is you've got cleanliness is absolutely next to godliness. You get it on your fingers or on your tools or whatever else. If you accidentally get it on the lid of just the main resin rather than the catalyst, you'll find you can't get the lid off. And worse than that, they use childproof lids, which just under load they just crumple. So I don't know if that's a marketing gimmick. I mean, I would like a decent screw top and trust the common sense. That's West. This is 2 pieces of firewood. That's West's, and you can get fillers of all sorts to bulk it out to make it so that you could do a fillet with it rather than anything. You get different coloured fillers. The fillers are very cheap. They look weirdly like some sort of fluffy dust. I would think breathing it in is a nightmare, health and safety wise. Also, you've got to clean everything. You might get away. I buy cheap brushes and work on the assumption I'm going to chuck each brush every time I use it. The ideal way of doing it is you mix the resin, put a coat of resin on to soak in, and then put some filler in the other if you want to, if you've got uneven surfaces, and then stick them together. The big thing with it is you've got to clean everything up fairly quickly, and the stuff to clean it with, easy enough to get from decent decorating wholesalers. Acetone. There's only one snag with acetone. It kills brain cells. That's why I'm missing quite a few. I'll just hand it round if anybody wants to have a sniff. Does anybody know what acetone used to be used for a lot?
Nail varnish.
Yeah, nail varnish remover. Now they use acetone-free ones. But there again, they've invented gel nail polish, which is just as bad. You can have a smell of it. That won't acetone will also melt epoxy. That's epoxy. So when we used to keep it in the boat, we used to keep it in a double container, because if you spilt a bottle of acetone in the boat, it went straight through the bottom.
Good for track cleaning.
Yeah, good for track cleaning, good for all sorts. So I've killed a few brain cells now. I'll pass that around. You're quite happy if you want to bust it.
Ken, you mentioned this, this is a railway question.
Yeah.
You mentioned this glue called aerolite.
Yeah, aerolite.
Aerolite, right? Can you think why the North Eastern Railway had a locomotive called aerolite? As far as I know, it wasn't glued together.
Well, I don't know, maybe North East is quite interesting because a lot of the adhesive people were based in the North East.
Or it might be named after the company that made it.
Might be named after the company, that's the thought. Yeah. Or it could have been named after a chocolate. Yeah, that's the type bond, non-plastic resin, and you can see how quickly that's stuck hard down as well. I like them when their initial stick or tack is quite good, but I couldn't overemphasise that you're much better off leaving something as long as you can, particularly if it's got water as a solvent. This stuff is, it will eventually go, but still quite slow. So you've got quite, one of the words with glues and adhesives is open time, which is how long it stays in a state where you can use it. Some things are very quick. I mean, the open time on that is literally seconds, whereas the open time on Cascamite might be, a good long time, half an hour. Open time on that now, on this particular one, is only theoretically 10 minutes. You probably get a bit longer. Just jumping back, you see, for example, like if you use Evo Stick, if you put it on wet and you don't give it time to air dry before you contact adhesive, it takes forever to go off. It takes a long time. You can move it about for ages, but equally you find it very hard to get a thin joint. You couldn't do a rub joint like the one I did on the other bit somewhere around here. Oh, there it is. You couldn't rub a joint with it because it always seems to bulk out of it. You've got to clamp it. I mean, that is, when you consider that was just done, it's still possible probably to break. I can't bust that now. So I hope I've sold everybody on to having a go at that. I mean, even if the club bought, everybody had a jar full, it will last for ages. I was going to say, one other source, I'll try and do a list of these and get them put on the internet. There's a firm based near Crewe, near Leighton Hospital, called Alexander Paper, and they do huge range of papers and cardboards, mainly for art purposes or mount boards, but always useful to know those places. They're wholesale, but anybody can go in, and you can always get cards or bulk sheets. A lot of the art suppliers will do sheets of watercolour paper as sheets rather than... Watercolour paper isn't cheap, but sometimes you can get offcuts. Because Alexander Paper, for example, I don't know whether the finish on this piece came from them, but when they're cutting to size from big sheets, they end up with bucketfuls of bits left over. You get a half a kilo bag for about £1 or something. That's the one I passed out. You can see it's got a lovely finish on it. Beautiful paper. Let me just have a little look. Covers solvents. Gorilla Glue. Cling film I've not used any tonight, but cling film is brilliant as a barrier if you want to stop anything sticking. Works a treat. Acrylic sheet. And
so what is a PU adhesive?
sorry?
What's a PU adhesive? What makes it different?
I think PU stuff. I think it's polyurethane. That's the Gorilla Glue, the PU.
Yeah, I use Gorilla Glue.
But maybe the best tip I can give anybody is have a good read at the label. However, having said that, some of these adhesives, because they come in such small bottles, not only is it micro writing, but they don't really tell you much about it. So you're much better going online and having a look at the manufacturer's technical data sheet. Oh no. I think this is one for you to say, Ken.
Me?
Yeah, it's another of these names. Contains dimethyl throxyphenyl siloxane trimethyl.
Do we have a chemist in the process?
Sticky stuff. So I'm pretty sure it's a PU there. I mean, it says stone, wood and more. Oh, ceramics, glass, ceramics, metal, stone, wood, foam and more. Well, it's going to be a good glue to cover all of those 100% effectively, but I've used it and it's quite good for quite a lot of purposes.
Would you suggest putting all glues in the fridge like that one? Does it keep all glues?
No, I don't think it does, but however this one, the clear one, I've had this quite a while and it's still staying okay. If it was the original Gorilla Glue, the brown stuff that foams, that would have gone long ago.
So that glue, is that what you recommend for sticking white metal to brass?
I would give it a go. Cyanoacrylic's quite brittle and quite hard, and very often quite difficult to get. The shiny things like glass are very hard to stick. And I have found that things like this will stick glass and ceramics a lot easier because they stick to the surface, but you're not going to get an immensely strong bond. In fact, if I can get this off.
See, locos or models have been made with, say, etched brass kits with white metal castings. After a few years, a lot of these castings just fall off.
Yeah.
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 Solder them.
Well, you can solve them, but of course you've got to be careful with white metal.
Right.
It's melting point. It depends how good it is as well, the white metal, because the solder for white metals, if I'm right, I think it's about 70 centigrade. But the actual melting point of white metal is not much above. Because you can get white metal that's been soldered with low temperature solder apart with boiling water.
But some of these bottles have already been painted.
Yeah.
You see what I mean? Like, you know, they've come off. You don't really want to be soldering your paint work.
I'll poke a bit of this is, it's usually a lot more liquid than that, but not, when I say a lot, not that much. I've got an endless supply of nozzles, because what I do is I leave them to dry out and then pull the thing out. So I'm just going to do a quick, oh, these bits of wood. Now you probably find that this would stick what you were talking about together quite well. First time I've used this. These are great, these, because they can squeeze a lot harder than I can. Now, deliberately put enough on so that it can squeeze out a bit so you can see what it's like. But even now, see, I can wiggle that into position. But when you're talking about initial tack, even I've put long strips on with this, 12 foot long, and squashed them on, joining two pieces of wood together, and your initial tack stays, it doesn't slide about, it doesn't move, and in fact once you've squashed it together, like I've just squashed it, you don't need to worry about even clamping it. You can clamp it, but that would now take, the bit that's oozed out will take up to 12 hours to go off to the point where you could peel it off. But where you've squashed it to a thin layer in between that, doesn't need any air to make it go off. It'll settle down fairly quickly. Just see how long that takes to dry. But that would definitely stick bits on like that. But again, that's got a shelf life. It will just get, I've used it way past its shelf life. A year, 2 years past its shelf life. But it just gets thicker and thicker. Which in some cases is quite handy. But that's...
Can you use a thinner with it then?
No. You can get this stuff off with white spirit. I've got a whole bunch of solvents that I use. Isopropyl alcohol, meths, terp substitute or white spirit. A big bunch of them. And I've even got solvent, PVA solvent cleaner, which is used for cleaning, very cheap and easy to buy. It's meant for cleaning conservatories and things like that. It's dreadful stuff. I'm sure that kills brain cells even faster because it's a horrendous smell. So I don't use it unless I'm in the open air, preferably. you can get this stuff off with white spirit. But I just use any solvent cleaner that I think will work with it, with anything, and let that go from there. So have we got any questions? I've obviously worn your brain cells down.
We've asked them to do as you go along.
Probably think of them when we get home.
Is there anything anybody wants to see done that I've not done?
There's one comment from Ralph who says laminated card should work with laser.
Ah!
Does that help?
Well, you could send him one back saying, we'll wait and see. Let's just see if I've got anything else in there.
Are you going to put some of that information in the link?
Well, I could do. I might not suddenly do it tomorrow, but I could do a little bit of. If I put down some of the people that the problem is, I have checked up on a few of the people. Like, I've not bought anything from that company called Morell's or FT Morell. They're in Heaton Chapel. I used to go there many years ago because I used to use quite a lot of their stuff. But slowly over the years, they've gone into different things. They still do it, but it's not their main product line anymore. And that in itself gives you a problem because it's where to source these things. I'm not always 100% sure about some of the internet suppliers, and some of them are incredibly expensive with things that should be relatively cheap. But I can't think of anything else that I was going to say tonight. I'll just let me whiz down that list. I don't know with plastic out. Oh, well, as a side issue, I wasn't going to cover anything to do with plastics tonight. Plastic art and sticking plastics together is a whole new ball game and is even more complex than wood, cardboard and paper. I think we've all had a go at doing things, but solvent welding and adhesives that, I mean, this will stick plastics together wonderfully, and I could stick a piece of metal onto, a piece of anything onto there with it that would last a long time. It might not be 100% structurally sound. In fact, while we had the break, we were talking about structural adhesives and things like metal. There's no adhesive I know of, and correct me if anybody knows any different, that where you can stick two pieces of metal, like two pieces of steel together, and when you tear it apart, a piece of the metal comes off with the adhesive. It just doesn't happen. Except in wood, you can find lots of adhesives, and this is when you were talking about how big is the surface area and what's 100 kilograms, because somebody questioned that. You can get lots of adhesives where you pull up two pieces of wood apart and you end up with pieces of wood stuff. So that adhesive is structurally stronger than the material. But I don't know of anything that will do that in metal.
Is that Stixall only available in
Well, very weird. You remember I said that this is Everbuild Stixall. And if you look at the bottom, you get lots of clues off the packets. It says a Seeker company. Seeker are the parent company, and they only supply the construction industry direct, generally speaking. And weirdly, Stixall was black, and the one that Seeker did, under their own name, which was called multi-stick,
Mm.
was white.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they didn't do white, and the other one didn't do black. And you think, what is going on here? It's the same company, make it in the same plant, and put it in the same tubes, but with different... And what's going on? Now you might find that white and black are available in this, and a couple of years ago, during lockdown, they brought out a clear one. So there's a clear one somewhere around that, and presumably they had a problem with the chemistry being able to make a clear one. They couldn't do it. They could make black, they could make white, but chemically, I've never bought a clear one, and I'd have to look at the technical information leaflet to see whether the clear one was exactly the same material. But, you know, again, if in doubt, have a try and see what happens. So, yeah, I use both the white and the black, but found it very weird. Easy to get hold of, both screw fix and... But you probably find something, I don't know, but I can't remember offhand, but you'll probably find something alien like Screwfix do the white one and Toolstation do the black one. But as they're always next door to each other, it's not a lot of work to work out which. So at that point, I think I'm done.
Right, very good.
Okay.
Unless you've got any questions.
Right, thank you very much, Ken.
Okay.
Yeah, great stuff.
Certainly an eye-opener for me. I've never heard of rabbit eye glue. That's what I told you earlier on. Are you sure there's no more questions, gentlemen?
Yeah, I'll just mention that then when we've converted everybody. There's rabbit skin glue is what they use to make size for sizing artist canvases. It's very much finer and very much better quality and lasts for 1,000 years. Must do, because I think the Mona Lisa, the back of that's rabbit eye glue. So it's lasted well, hasn't it?
It has. It has.
So much for somebody saying that rabbit glue's only got limited shelf life.
Okay, thank you very much, Ken.
Yeah,
Can I ask you
brilliant.
to show our appreciation to Ken in the usual manner?